ready to change the world with elephants on their noses. It gives me great pleasure to introduce. This is like, you can hear my voice here. So in a minute we're going to be spoken to and addressed by Rabbi Burg, who not only is the CEO of Aish and has spent the past few decades in Jewish education and in terms of developing Jewish youth, both with NCSY, but he's the reason that we are here now. When he took over and he said that we got to get trips here, we got to bring these guys, come and he's visited us, and he said, there's so many amazing guys, there's so many amazing girls out on college campus, and they need to come to Aish, they need to see what we're doing, and they need to buy in and be part of changing the world. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Rabbi Burg.
Thank you very much. When did you guys get in? How recently? Oh wow, a little tired? All right, we'll send some more caffeine to the tables. Welcome, it's great to have you here, and especially for those I just met a couple weeks ago at Penn State when I was there for the day. Thank you again for that tour. And it's really, for us, it's amazing to have you here in our building. Just tell you a little bit about where you're sitting. This building, the Aish World Center, is really an amazing feat. I tell people all the time, if someone were to show up with $1 billion in cash and say, I want to build a building like this, they actually practically couldn't. This building has the only private entrance onto Kotel Plaza. And I call this place a little bit like the United Nations of the Jewish people. At every given day, I was sitting here just a few days ago in this room with one of the first missions of Jews from Cuba that came to Israel to spend time here. And we have people from South America, from Europe, from all over. Every floor in this building, you'll hear different languages spoken by Jews from all around the world. And this really is a place where they all come together, come to spend some time, come to spend time with Aish, to grow as Jews, to learn Jewish wisdom, to understand not just what we're supposed to do, but why we do it. As a matter of fact, recently, we had a woman by the name of Tzipi Hatavelli here in the building. Anyone know who Tzipi Hatavelli is? So Tzipi Hatavelli is the Deputy Foreign Minister of the State of Israel. Right? So the Deputy Foreign Minister of the State of Israel. Those of you into politics, you may know that we don't have a foreign minister in Israel because they've held the position open for 2 years, waiting on a coalition. So in fact, she is the Foreign Minister of the State of Israel. And she's very young. She's probably in her early to mid-30s. She's a really passionate person, and she sat here for 2 hours. And all she wanted to talk about were these types of trips. She wanted to understand young people coming to Israel with HaTorah. And at the end, I walked her out of the basement onto the private entrance exit out to Kotel Plaza. And I said to her, I said, I have a present for you. And she jokingly said to me, oh, like a book, because that's what rabbis give. I said, no, I have something better. And I took out my key card to the downstairs. And I said, I want you to know that this building is not just HaTorah's building. This building belongs to Jewish people and certainly belongs to the foreign ministry. And we want you to know that this, you can use this building anytime you want. Here's the keys to the building. And she was very, very overcome with emotion at that point of being able to use the building and being here. And literally, all week long, all day long, we just had, not long ago, a couple weeks ago, Forbes, right? We've all heard of Forbes. Forbes had a group of Chinese billionaires that were traveling in Israel for a conference, and they wanted to understand why Jews are smart and how the Talmud works. So they called up HaTorah. They came down here with 11 Chinese billionaires, and we found in our yeshiva next door one of our students that spoke fluent Mandarin. And I just want you to picture the scene here. You're sitting there with 11 Chinese billionaires. You're sitting there with Forbes, and there's a yeshiva guy, like nice white shirt, black pants, sits us out, big black yarmulke, giving over a Talmud class in Mandarin, in Chinese. Those are the types of things that happen in this building, and it's really a testament to what HaTorah is and how special it is. And we're blessed to have you as part of our extended family. It really, and this is for many of you, your first trip to our building, to our home here. But just understand for the rest of your life, this is your home to come here and be a part of HaTorah. I'd like to share with you, if I can, just a few short words of Torah. Right? We're sitting here across from the Temple Mount. Just want to share a few words of Torah. But this Torah I'm about to give you was one of the most awkward Divrei Torah, one of the most awkward Torah thoughts, biblical thoughts, that I ever gave in my entire life. And I'll tell you a little bit about the background. I spent a lot of time working in Germany. Right? Those of you who may or may not know, have some background, at the fall of the Soviet Union, so the Jews in the Soviet Union, in Russia, didn't have a lot of money, and they weren't sure what to do, where to go. Many of them came to Israel, but over 100,000 of them went to Germany. Because of German guilt, they gave economic packages to Jews, and overnight, literally, you had 100,000 Jews in Germany. And because of the economic packages that they accepted from the German government, they were placed all over the country. And the issue with that was they didn't really necessarily have a community, and many of them were assimilating, and they were just disappearing to the Jewish people in Germany. So I went there. At the time, I worked with a youth group called NCSY, and we actually have a very famous bencher that some say Birkat Hamazon with. We translated to German, and we started to do a lot of work there. And one of the things that the community there did through the Lauder Foundation is they built a rabbinical seminary in Berlin to train rabbis that spoke German so that they could send these rabbis out across the country to work with the Jews. And I was at the first rabbinical ordination, the first graduation seminary for rabbis that took place in Munich. Now, this is the first graduation of rabbis since before World War II in Germany. You can imagine the emotion that was going through the room. I remember thinking, the Minister of the Interior in Germany spoke, and just thinking that this is a guy in charge of the Gestapo 70 years ago, is now speaking at a rabbinical ceremony. And they broadcast on TV. It was a huge event. I went to the second one, which was in Leipzig. And by the time I got time for the third one, which was in Cologne, I was asked to speak. And this is a number of months in advance. They set up, all the Jews would come to Cologne, and I was asked to deliver some thoughts. Now, what happened right before we all went to Cologne, and you may have read about this a couple years ago, there was a court case in which the judges said that circumcision should be banned and illegal because of the pain to the baby. Now, I want you to envision this. We're in Germany 70 years later, right, after the Holocaust, and the Germans are now telling us that we can't perform certain basic commandments. Obviously, the Jewish community was outraged. The government wasn't sure what to do. There was a lot of apologizing involved. So we're here coming, and the judgment was in Cologne. We're coming to Cologne. Everyone's coming from all over, and it was like the elephant in the room. Right? Every speech was alluding to this fact. So here I am. I've got to speak. As a matter of fact, they sent the Minister of Defense to that one, also to kind of speak about this. The Minister of Defense of Germany spoke about being pro-circumcision. It was a little bizarre. So here you are. You gotta say something meaningful. It's Germany. It's 70 years after the Holocaust. They've just tried to ban circumcision. You're celebrating the creation and the ordination of new rabbis. What do you say? So I'd like to share with you the words I said there, and I think that they'll probably speak to you as well. I started off by talking about that there are different times in Jewish history in which we've been persecuted. The Holocaust was just one in a long line throughout the last 2,000 years that we've had problems in many different countries. And it was during one of these times where a family had to make a very fateful decision. The decision was they had a baby, and they could keep him in their home, but there's a good chance the baby might get killed for being a Jew. Or do you take the baby and put him into a Gentile, a non-Jewish household? And so the baby has a chance to grow up, right? And it will be healthy and be able to survive, but possibly lose the Jewish heritage. Now, we can't judge something like this because we've never been through it. But the decision was made to take that baby and put him into a non-Jewish household. And the baby was raised into adulthood, had money, education, could walk down the street without being beat up. Really everything you could ask for. Well, there's one point when that child grew to adulthood that they were challenged with the fact that they found out that they were Jewish. And they had to make a fateful decision. Do you rejoin us, literally in this room? Do you take a seat at our table? Or do you stay in your comfortable home and live out your life? And there's nothing more powerful than the status quo, just to stay doing what you're doing. And that child made a fateful decision to rejoin the Jewish nation. And we are forever thankful because that child was Moses. Moses did not grow up in a Jewish household. He grew up in an anti-Semitic household. He grew up in a house that hated Jews. And he made that fateful decision, and it says in the Bible, he saw a Jew getting beat up by an Egyptian, and he killed the Egyptian, then he had to run away into the desert. And as he's in the desert, he becomes a shepherd. He's out leading his flock, and he bumps into a burning bush. And he starts a conversation with God. God tells him, Moses, I need you to go back to Egypt. I need you to save the Jewish people. And Moses says back, he says, I'm not going back there. I just ran away from him. I'm not going back. And they're arguing back and forth, God and Moses, until one point, Moses says to God, if I go back, which of your names should I be using? And God says, well, that's easy. Just use Ekyash or Ekya. In English, that translates as, what'll be is what'll be. Now, it's obvious that both Moses and God understand that interaction, the question, the answer, the back and forth. What's also clear is that for the rest of us, we don't have a clue. We've never heard of this name. Why does he need a name? It doesn't make any sense. So there was a rabbi by the name of the Aish Kodesh, right? Literally translated as Holy Fire. That's a book he wrote. This rabbi was the rabbi to the Jews during the Holocaust in the ghetto. This rabbi did not survive the Holocaust. And the words of Torah that I'm about to share with you, I always refer to these as holy words, because the reason that we have these words of Torah is because he wrote them down, put them in a milk bottle, and buried them in the ghetto. And after the war, after World War II, they were dug up by a construction worker, and they were returned to the Jewish people. That, I think, classifies as holy. So he said the following. He said, there are two ways in which we view our lives. So the first way is present. We're sitting here in this room, right? Sitting here in Israel, enjoying with friends. The second way people view their lives is in the past, where I went to school, my family, what got me to this point. Aish Kodesh said there's a third way to view your life that most people don't utilize, and that's in the future. Not just where I am, not just where I've come from, but who I can become. And Aish Kodesh says what God was telling Moses is, Moses, I understand that right now you're a shepherd in the desert, and you don't think that you can be a leader. But Moses, you need to understand that you can go back and you can save the Jewish people. You need to know who you can become. And when you get there, and the Jews say we've been slaves for so long, we don't even know what it is to be free. You need to tell them what kind of great nation they can become, focusing on the future. And as I said in Germany, standing there, that these rabbis that were on stage and were being ordained, young men that were going to go out and work with the Jews of Germany. I said, with all due respect to the courts of Germany, as a Jew, been there, done that. We've been told by the best of them what we can and cannot do. And frankly, we're still there and we'll always still be there. And these young men are going to go out and continue to teach circumcision and every other commandment, because that's what we do as Jews. And I would tell all of you, and I hope to get to know you a little bit better, some of you I know from before, but I would tell all of you, I don't know much where you are now. I know the universities. I can't tell you much about your past. But what I can do is tell you about your future. Just by being in this room, just by being a part of our family at HaTorah, just by being here in Israel, you are the future leadership of the Jewish community in every way, shape, or form. Whether it be spiritual leadership in terms of absorbing wisdom and being able to give it over in terms of what it means to be a Jew, why it's important, why we do the things that we do. But even the physical safety. Don't forget for one moment that Moses was the person that received the Torah from Mount Sinai. But he was also the person that saved the Jews from genocide in Egypt. The Jews are physically threatened everywhere in the world. I spent a lot of my career, I worked for the Simon Wiesenthal Center, spent time in Europe, I spent time in other places where they don't like us very much. We have spiritual and physical threats everywhere. And the bottom line is that you are our future. Right? One day you're going to be standing up here giving the same talk, trying to inspire people. That's what it's all about. It's about just thinking about your Judaism, thinking about where you're going, thinking about how you can help, thinking how you can build. Because the reason we sit in this room is because for thousands of years, our ancestors, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, the people who came before us, they took a stand. They took a stand century after century to be Jews. We're here because the Aish Kodesh sat in the ghetto. And when the Germans were trying to kill us, he sat in a room and he talked to Jews about the future. Now, they weren't silly, they weren't stupid, they knew there wasn't much of a future. But it doesn't matter because Jews always talk about the future. Because one way or another, the Jewish people always have a future. And your future will always be tied to Israel, to that wall out there, to that kotel, to the Knesset, to everything you're going to find in this country. So I give you a blessing that for the next week or two that you're here, that you find your Jewish path. No one can tell you what it is. No one can say this is exactly what your path is. Only you can look into your heart and see that. But just know that the Jewish people, the Jewish nation are counting on you like we have for so many young people for so many generations. And God willing, I hope to be able to talk to you, visit you, come see you in some of your campuses. And I'd be more than happy for you to share to me what your path looks like and how you've scoped it out. So thank you for being part of our family, and thank you for being here.